My name is Ian the Dynamo Kelly, and you are listening to the Superior Comic Show. You're listening to the Dynamo Podcast
Hello and welcome to the Superior Comic Show, the Irish show on all things pop culture. I'm your host, Peter. Unfortunately, my surname isn't Parker. And today I'm joined by the artist formerly known as the Dynamo, Ian the Wolverine Kelly. Welcome to the show, Ian.
I like that. For one show only, I like that. So I'm the Wolverine today. That sounds good to me. Sounds good to me. I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
No bother at all. Listen, head of the network, I have to do it, you know what I mean? For when them paychecks come through.
They don't bounce. Yeah, no, it's great to see the Superior Comic Show, kind of doing what it should do and doing well again. You've had some pretty awesome guests over the last couple of weeks, and it's nice to see, you know, a show that's on the network doing really well. So I'm actually very happy to be on the show and make my debut on your show today.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. We've been talking about this for a while.
Yeah, very true.
See, a lot of people, I say, from Dynamo's dozen anyway, will know you from your wrestling background. And myself now, after getting to know you over the last while through the group chats and various messages, I've picked up on that collector side of you and the comic book fan inside the wrestler.
Yeah, it's mad actually. Yeah, that you say that because I don't know how soon you want to get into that. Like, but being with your audience, being comic fans. Yeah, I've been a massive collector for years. I was always I would call myself like a decent illustrator. I was a decent penciler. You know what I mean? And I always just enjoyed it. I've done it for fun. Haven't done it in quite a while now, but like, there's always people that want me to get back into it. I'm like, well, look, you got to be passionate about something like that, to actually do your best work. And that goes for anything. You got to be passionate about doing your best work, regardless of what it is that you're putting out to people. Um, and for me, it was a hobby. But in terms of, I was just always, enamored with just the illustrations and the colors and the storytelling outside of the storytelling. With pencilers. So that's kind of where I started becoming a comic book fan. And then once I start reading the stories too, on top of that, I was like, oh shit, man, this is, the pictures that Jack Kirby are creating here are actually mimicking what Stanley is actually writing. So
It's a beautiful mixture of literature and art just coming together. And not enough people see it that way. Too many people see comic books as just a nerd genre, but it's literature and art forming together in a beautiful union.
absolutely, in the most beautiful of union, because it's not like some little dandy, book that for children here. It's these are books that, like I say, and like you say, have literature and proper storytelling, in the sense of, I mean, we had a conversation, didn't we, the other week when we were talking. We went back on the Fantastic Four, and we went into the early kind of Fantastic Four with a Mad Tinker just before Doctor Doom comes into the series properly. And when you look at Stan Lee's writing, for example, and he deserves all the credit in the world anyway. So of course I'm going to put Stan Lee over on your show.
Yeah.
But it's you look at it and you kind of go, wow, like he actually has different verbiage for each different character. So you almost feel what way the character's speaking. You know what I mean? Um, and kind of their lingo. So you become a lot more, I suppose, attached to the character when you realize the kind of right. And I mean, look, not just to put Stanley over. We're obviously going to evolve into more recent comics, with that. But that's the early version. And for people to say that kind of lingo or that kind of writing is for nerds, fair enough. Maybe it is, but maybe that's why nerds are smarter than everyone else too.
Maybe that's why nerds go on to become the coaches for these knuckleheads in their football teams because stats. You know, who's better at stats than nerds?
Just saying,
Mm.
you know.
I mean, bash us all you want, but we'll be coaching it. We'll be in control of your
Yeah.
paycheck.
Yeah, yeah.
Before we go into more recent ones, I'm sure everyone's heard the story of your wrestling career by now. But a question I have to ask is, did you take any inspiration from any comic characters when developing your persona and your gimmick in the wrestling?
Well, when I started wrestling, it was like, as I say, I was kind of knee deep in comics, and I was young starting out in wrestling. Like, I think it was 17. And as everyone knows, like Fergal Devitt, aka Finn Balor, was my head coach, and Paul Tracy and John Moss. I have to kind of give everyone credit for that. Like, you know what I mean? I was a big comic book fan, but in the background, it was kind of it was still taboo back then. You know what I mean? Even though it was like, 2002, it was still taboo. You didn't tell everyone that you were mad into comics because they probably thought you were, especially in such a masculine thing. Hey, man, we got to all get big, But I did actually. I was a huge Mark slash fan of. I'm sure a lot of people will know what I'm saying. Mark
Yeah.
is, like, just in case that one. Yeah, I was a big Mark for Deadpool and for Spider-Man and for Wolverine. But Deadpool was kind of the some of the character that I tried to portray. I like that Merc with a mouth kind of style, because at that time my first comics that I bought from Deadpool were the 1997 series with Ed McGuinness on the pencil. And when he basically went in and basically destroyed Alpha Force. It was I was like, this guy is just awesome, you know what I mean? And it's funny because nowadays people will kind of know the story that I'm telling and understand what I'm saying, because you've got an actual Deadpool film
Yeah.
to to show you exactly what kind of character he is. But back then you had to kind of make up your own presumption.
Thank you, Ryan,
And
for getting that made.
yeah, and in fairness, Ryan Reynolds he knocked it out of the park. You know what I mean? But I mean, Ryan Reynolds is an intelligent human being, so he obviously read the whole comic series and realized this is obviously what Deadpool's about, and he kind of came in and nailed it on the head. So yeah, my kind of slimy little character, being the heel, was very much so based around on what I read from those early Deadpool comics. To be fair, um, you know, I always like to give the idea that, like, who knows, I could have a blind owl sitting in my basement somewhere. You don't know that, and I'm not going to let you know that, So it's you're only going to get to see what I want you to see. So yeah, 100%. That's a good question, actually. I never thought about it that way, but I think comic books and wrestling and music and showmanship in general go hand in hand.
They do. I know. I 100% agree. It seemed to, like, as the taboo became less and less, more people came out as comic book fans. Eminem was in an issue of The Punisher, and I said he references comic books. We have Johnny Gargano currently in NXT, who's a big comics fan and posts all over Instagram. And then we had, who you mentioned before, Finn Balor, when started out was Prince Devitt, and some of his demon gimmicks came out in comic inspired paint.
Yep. Yeah, like coming out in the Venom costume, coming out in Spider-Man costume, especially before he got to the WWE, and coming out as the Joker, on some of the indie shows over in Scotland and stuff. So yeah, 100%. I think comic lore is great, and it's great to see now that it's actually. It's not that it is accepted, but it's great to see that so many people are, I suppose, knee deep in it, and a lot of people.
From a niche.
A lot of people are passive fans. Yeah, you know what I mean? People are passive fans that buy, like, a Captain Marvel or, a Captain America t-shirt in pennies because they sell them there. But like, it's still great to see. Do you know what I mean? Because you're like, back in the day, like, I remember an auntie going, "Are you wearing an Iron Man t-shirt? What age are you?" And I was like, old enough to wear an Iron Man t-shirt and make it look good.
It was. It's the older generation, and like you said, it's the masculine generation. Like myself, I got a lot of shit off members of my own family when I got my Spider-Man tattoo, and they're like, "What are you getting that for? It's this and that." And I was like, "Listen, there's a meaning behind this tattoo that only I know, and that I only tell people who are appreciative enough or respectful enough to actually ask me rather than just bash it. They don't, like, a lot of the older generation don't realize how much meaning one issue of comic book can have to a lot of people. Your hero,
Yeah,
Deadpool.
they would have got priests tattooed on their arms.
Like, your hero, Deadpool, back in, I think it was issue 22, 2 years ago, there was a whole issue on him talking a girl down from the ledge, from attempting to commit suicide, and it ends up with bringing her to the hospital and her agreeing to admit herself and get the help she needs.
Well, you see, that's why I always liked Deadpool, because he was the anti-hero. You know what I mean? Like, I have this right in front of me now. I went and bought this once again, to get the old stories and the introduction of Deadpool, into it, and it was like, and it leads up to my first foray into Deadpool comics as well. And it's funny because with these stories, they were so, like, they were inspiring in so many different ways, because it's like that movie Unbreakable. You know what I mean? You've got one guy who's a lunatic like Glass, and just saying, oh, he wants to be the bad guy, he wants to be the heel, because he can't actually do anything, and because he's got so much time to sit around and think about it, this guy must be my alpha versus my omega, whatever the hell what way you want to look at it. But I think it's such a there's so many great areas in comic books that aren't covered, and the stories themselves. I mean, like I say, that collaboration of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, I mean, they still probably are the best, in so many different ways, and they still stand the test of time. Sure, some of the lingo is a little bit different than, because they were written in the 60s, but the narrative is there. And the narrative is always good beats evil, you know what I mean? Um, but the journey is what it's about. And people want to be taken on that journey. We've come into 2020 now, where we're obviously, everybody's struggling for their place in the world at the moment, and struggling to kind of realize what's next, what's tomorrow. Not to get too deep, but but so, like, if people want to, read a comic book based on something that makes them feel good. I mean, for example, the two big companies are the first companies to really kind of put women in a good light, because don't forget Image and all those comics back in the day, as great as they were all just big tits and sweaty women, and look, the art was great, like, and there were great stories, but that's what it was all about. You know what I mean? And it's no dissimilar to pro wrestling. Pro wrestling was the same.
Yeah.
The only way you got hired was if you were willing to get implants, and you had to, be willing to make an absolute fool of yourself. And this didn't define some of these women that were doing that. Now women can do shit, and it's great to see. Like, women are probably, some of the women are the greatest pro wrestlers on the planet.
Yeah, we're on
And it's the same. And it's the same in the comic world. You know what I mean? It's you've got movies now portraying a lot of women in lead roles as well, rather than just being, the sidekick that never really gets any kind of verbiage on camera, other than like a silly line. You know what I mean? But I mean, I think DC and Marvel were always very good in that. I mean, you can look back on the old Batman Batman movies even. You had the likes of Poison Ivy in the 90s being portrayed. You had Catwoman. I only watched it last night again. Batman Returns. I mean, Michelle Pfeiffer, was such a cool character in that movie, and it wasn't just all kind of, pretty little lines. It was actually a pretty prevalent character in that movie. So I think it's for the greater good.
So let's get off the deep stuff. Let's get back into what this is about. Let's back into the comics. You mentioned earlier the classics, and a lot of classics that you like, and you've been reading that Fantastic Four book. You've been reading the classic Deadpool. Have you been reading any of the modern stuff out? Or
I got to be honest with you, I said this to you maybe 2 weeks ago. Excuse me. I was reading the first return from a comic perspective was actually Doctor Doom's solo book, Pottersville. and I've read that recently, and I was like, I obviously got the graphic novel,
Yeah.
but I read that, and I just thought it was such a great book because it was had elements of comedy in it too, but it had elements of doom, like no pun intended, and just on the narrative side of things. And I was just really excited by that, and that's what kind of got me back into reading older stuff. You know what I mean? Because even though I was a huge comic book fan, I wasn't like the biggest comic book nerd, if that makes sense. Like you wouldn't catch me, in lines waiting for, the latest book or anything like that. It was just more of a case of I was just a big fan of comics, and I was always a big fan of the art. And the older I got, I became a big fan of the narratives within the art rather than just the art. Whereas I was younger, I was trying to mimic my favorite artists and stuff like that. And I still love the stories. Don't get me wrong, because like I say, some of those stories stayed with me. But yeah, I mean, it's so funny because people always know me as a guy that like comics, but I wouldn't be like on your level, for example, who would know pretty much every story or
And
be
look,
up
to
to
be honest,
date on all the
you'll have me
current
for
stuff.
the older stuff. Like I got into comics in the year 2000. I started out with Ultimate Spider-Man #1 by Brian Michael Bendis. Um,
Yeah.
so I was 6. Then it was the first comic my grandmother bought me, and that got me into comics. And I went from there. So a lot of the older stuff, you'd have more knowledge on that. I've dived back a bit with the likes of um, the Dark Phoenix saga with X-Men. I dived back reading that
Nice.
and things like that. But I think the older comics, like you mentioned, a lot of older comics to me that I'm kind of like, shit, I need to get back and read these.
Yeah, like I recently read like Mark Miller's Wolverine series, which is unbelievable.
Mm.
And Wolverine goes on an absolute rampage,
Yeah,
and nobody can control him. You know what I mean? I'm kind of knee deep in that as well. And like I say, I'm balls deep in the early Doctor Doom kind of stuff as well. Because Doctor Doom is actually one of my favorite characters as well. Because he's such a great character. Because he's not just a lot of people always think of Doctor Doom as this kind of Nazi guy or an
yeah,
innuendo that he's some Nazi guy. He's not really. He's actually quite a quite a loving guy. Like underneath it all, you know what I mean. Um, it's just more the brilliance and the kind of world domination side of him one is more apparent than the kind of the soft side, I suppose. So there's so many levels to these characters, which is why I think people, and it's also why comics are so big across the world, and why DC and Marvel, and especially Marvel, are um so huge today, like because you're talking about a guy like Stan Lee, and I keep going back to him, and I will continuously do so. He made some of these older characters, especially these older characters, to have levels. Do you know what I mean? So it actually allowed the writers that came later to do so much with these characters. You know, um, like a Doctor Doom, like as I say in Pottersville now, he's like, whoa, shit, maybe this isn't me. Do you know what I mean? Maybe I am meant for something greater, and it's just like I say, when you get some great creations and they have levels to them, because that's what it is. And what they are doing there essentially, and what comics do is they have levels to the characters rather than just being Captain America on paper. They actually give you some emotional background on who these characters are and why they are.
yeah.
Um
No, I 100% agree. Like you were mentioned there, Doom and the levels, and an interesting stat for you: the longest run of peace in the Marvel universe in the comics was when Doctor Doom was ruling the world.
there you go.
Yeah, and he had a big part in another comic. I'm not sure if you read it. Secret Wars, when they actually mixed the Ultimate Universe with the regular continuity in comics, and that's when he
Yeah.
became God Emperor Doom. Um, like, and it's a pity he hasn't been done right in the movies just yet.
That's all he ever wanted to be, was a god.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Because he went down and fought Satan in the pits of hell himself. And it was for a girl, not for anyone else. For a girl. So it's not, I mean, this guy just wants to be a god, which you can understand that. But once he's in power, then he's going to be sound.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
He'll fuck over anyone to get there, but once he's there, he'll be a good bloke.
It sounds a bit like politics today, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Well, except for the good bloke part.
Yeah. It's not at you, Donald Trump or Joe Biden.
No.
Imagine being an American and having to choose from those two guys.
In fairness, imagine being us and we don't get a choice between Varadkar and Martin.
Oh well, we're in a dictatorship. We're different.
Yeah. I want that so.
We'll keep politics off the show, though.
I know when you talked to me a couple of weeks ago about the comics, I did recommend. I'm just going to plug them here again. The likes of, I'm going to be doing a little awards video kind of at the end of the year, just on the Dynamo Podcast Network YouTube. But some of the writers that I have to say, when you get around to it, you need to read. There's Al Ewing, who I had in the show last week, who writes.
Yeah, I listened to that. Gentleman as well, yeah.
Dead sound. And then there's Donny Cates, who is writing the current Venom series and the King in Black series, which is, he's revitalized Venom to a point where it's one of the top sellers in Marvel at the minute. Those are two I would definitely recommend. And if you haven't touched on these ones, you probably have. They're pretty big. There's World War Hulk, which was...
I've heard of that, yeah.
Civil War, of course, still one of the top comics ever created. Secret Wars, as mentioned. And then on the DC side, there's Under the Red Hood, Flashpoint. There's tons and tons of... You're going to need to do some catching up.
And I am. And the thing is, I'll actually, for any of the listeners now as well, if they want to hook a brother up and add some to the DC universe for me, because I'll be honest, I've always been a Batman guy. Like, to be honest with you, my first ever superhero that I loved was Batman. And that was because of watching the old 1966 Batman, because that was still playing when I was a young man, you know what I mean? So every Saturday I'd be sitting in front of the TV eating my breakfast, just watching those shows, hook, line and sinker. And my granddad used to buy every single VHS tape. Remember them, kids? That you could buy, like, from all the, from the movie to the actual series that he could get. And I was just absolutely enthralled by them. And then I would, because he was definitely the first. And then obviously in 1989, movie came out. I mean, I was 6. You mentioned you were 6 when you got your first comic. So 6 is a kind of very, very impressionable age. So, and when I saw the Michael Keaton Batman, good Lord, I was a hook, line and sinker. You know what I mean? It was just absolutely incredible. And then I got the pleasure to go and see Batman Returns in the movies, in the theater, and it was like, wow, this is just the best, so like for a lot of kids, they were Terminator, they were, I was Batman. So and I have read, I'm not gonna lie, I've read, obviously, I've read some of Jim Lee's stuff, some of his Batman stuff. What else have I done? I've read some of the detective comics, but they're old as well. But there's some stuff that I've been recommended, on the Batman side of things. So I'm open to always open to new comics. So I will definitely take those recommendations from you.
I'd 100% recommend Under the Red Hood and watching the animated movie. There's an animated movie of Under the Red Hood, and it's probably my favorite animated comic movie until Into the Spider-Verse came out.
What's the one as well with where Inspector Gordon is the main guy, basically? Is that Batman? Oh, good Lord. Is it the Frank Miller one? No, that's the Daredevil one. There's a Batman one where, like, there's an animated version as well. I watched it where Gordon is the main man. You don't see much of Batman in it.
Are you thinking
really
of the TV show?
Yeah, no, there was an animated movie version. Let me see. You'll know it. I'm sure there's probably listeners that are listening to this now, right, going, "What the fuck is this going on about?" I know exactly what he's talking about, and they'll get it. Because I know Hush is a big one.
Yeah,
I know Hush is a big one. But I also know. Oh god damn it! I'll find it while you're talking. Don't worry. I'll find it while you're talking.
Yeah, see myself, I've openly admitted over the years, DC was never my strong suit. I've picked up on it over the last couple of years and got a bit more knowledge. Me, it was always Marvel growing up. But
Yeah,
you're speaking of
same.
retro stuff there, like the VHS tapes, things that even I would have grown up on. And on your own show, Dynamo's Dozen, you showed kind of this retro collector side of you when you brought on Rob Bruce from the Comic Book Men.
Sure. Yeah.
So go on. What is your prize comic book related collectibles?
I've some good stuff upstairs. I mean, comic book related collectibles. I would say I don't have the holy grail of that yet, but I'm starting to get into it. You know what I mean? I got myself, for example, I got myself the Marvel Legends series. Um, in the they're Hasbro's, aren't they?
Yeah,
Hasbro's, yeah. I got myself the Marvel Legends series, and I got the whole collection of the Fantastic Four, including the She-Hulk, and that's I'm super happy with that. They're sitting proudly up in my attic right now, or my loft for the Americans, um, ready to be opened as soon as the new year presents itself, and I see whatever else I've got. But I don't have that in Marvel wise. That's great. Like, yeah, I do have prized possessions in wrestling memorabilia, in music memorabilia and stuff like that. I've got a lot of VHS. I mean, I pretty much have every VHS that I've had since I was a kid. Um, what condition they're in, I don't know, but I'm never going to sell them anyway. You know what I mean?
I
I'm
probably should
not. I
have
don't really.
as the Wolverine. I probably should have introduced you as the collector.
Yeah. Like I don't collect to sell. Trade, that might be a different story. Do you know what I mean? I like trading. I've always liked trading. I grew up on trading. Back in the late '80s, early '90s, when we were growing up, it was all about trading.
Yeah,
So you give me a land of this, you give me a land of that, and if you were sneaky enough, like, you would hope the guy forgot. Um, that you trade it and he give you your thing back. But a lot of times I got burned on that one, so it didn't really work out. Um, but no, in terms of I'm really happy with. I'm a graphic novel guy now purely because I like to buy versions of the old stuff. Like, I'm a big fan of the Epic collections, as you've seen, and I love having them, and I can't wait to have them on a shelf. Just all one by one. Um, but in terms of my favorite, like, if you want to ask me my favorite comic that I've ever had, and my favorite
yeah.
comic
Listen, comics
book.
are collectibles in themselves.
Yeah, exactly. My favorite would be the Deadpool 97 issue number 2. That would be mine, because, like I say, for anybody, and I should be getting paid by Marvel here, so should we.
I've been trying
This
for.
one this one brings it up to it. Like, they bring it up to the Ed McGuinness stuff, and it's all in here. It brings it right up to where it's Sasquatch, and it's got the Alpha Force, um first appearance. That the second one. Oh my god, I can't remember what the second issue was, and I actually gave it away, believe it or not, to a good friend of mine, um, who it was his birthday one time, and I gave him my whole collection just because I don't know, feeling super nice, I guess. So I definitely was, but my comics weren't in great condition back then either, because, like I say, I was pulling pages. No, I don't mean pulling them out, but pulling pages apart, because I was, you know, trying to copy the style of drawing and copy the style of illustrating,
Yeah,
and so they weren't in great force. But I always told myself, like, you know what, I'm gonna get the graphic novels, and I'm gonna have them there in
yeah.
that way, and I can always go back to them. So I'm super cool with that, and I like having them in that. I'm actually gone back to I've gone back to Preacher. I don't know whether I told you that I'm reading the Preacher stuff at the moment, and But yeah, no. To answer your question, I don't really have anything that's. I mean, I had one of the earliest Mattel Spider Mans back in the day, and I wish I'd have left it on the card. Because if I'd have left that on card, it would be mint and probably worth a fortune. But like I say, I never collected to sell. So
Yourself, I collect
I,
pretty good.
yeah, I collect to bring to the grave with me. To be honest with you, I'm not even leaving my kids my shit. Fuck those little bastards. They can get their own collection.
You turn your back. What you love, kids? You'll turn your back one day and they'll sell your shit on you.
Oh, damn straight. And like fair enough. When I'm dead in the grave, I don't have any kids yet, but if I do, when I'm dead in the grave, they can really do what they want because I can't help that. But as long as I live, they ain't getting into the man cave. Put it that way.
I need to get one of them for myself. But so before we go any further, I realised I should have done this at the start of the show. It was very unprofessional of me. I brought up the Dynamos dozen there a few minutes ago, and I know I've not given you a chance to plug that just yet, especially when you've had someone as big as Rob Bruce on, who a lot of our listeners will be interested in. So go on, selfishly promote yourself.
Well, we are part of the same network anyway, but Dynamos doesn't. Yeah, that's a little ditty that I put together a while back. No, Dynamos doesn't. Listen, I was kind of in the midst of a move. There was kind of some personal stuff going on in the life before I'd met the significant other and all that stuff, and um, I'd always had this idea in my head that I would love to put a podcast together. And that was because I was listening to the likes of early podcasts. I was listening to the likes of Steve Austin and Jericho and Joe Rogan. Um, I was a big fan of Howard Stern and all that as well. For all the American listeners, I was a big fan of Howard Stern. I loved the way he had such a different show to everybody else. You know what I mean? And kind of no strings attached. They could say what they want, all that kind of thing. And I basically decided I wanted to do a podcast, but I'd never gotten around to it. And then I did eventually start a podcast, obviously, when I met the missus, and was a little bit more comfortable in life in terms of having money and having, you know, security and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I was like, right, this is gonna be a podcast where I'm gonna aim for the fucking shoot for the stars. You know what I mean? I'm gonna try and get everybody and anybody that's on, like anybody that I've grown up with an interest in, to try and get them on. And for a lot of your listeners, they probably won't really appreciate all the pro wrestlers that we've had on or the musicians that we've had on.
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. On our Twitter is full of pro wrestling tweets and music tweets.
Yeah, well, I mean, like we had Jeff Jarrett on the night before he got inducted into the Hall of Fame, which was crazy. Double J, Jeff Jarrett, like multi-time world champion. We had Harley Race on, um, Brian Blair from the Killer Bees. We had, Jesus, Ricky Morton from the Rock and Roll Express, who was then got fame through AEW now and NWA. And then Phil Anselmo from Pantera. It was one of my biggest heroes because that was one of my favorite bands. So to kind of get him on was pretty huge on two occasions. And yeah, like, and then with the first because like I say, once I got back into my comic realm, I signed up for Amazon Prime and I watched all the comic book Comic Book Man show with Kevin Smith show.
Yeah.
Comic Book Man. And Rob Bruce was always my favorite character in it because he was just like, I thought he was just a cool guy. He reminded me of Mickey Rourke or something, just this real kind of cool old guy that knew his shit. And you were kind of like, because, when you're younger, you always look up to the older guys and you're like, hey, he's pretty cool. I like that. I like that man. And yeah, I reached out to him and we got him on the show recent enough. I think it's 2 episodes ago. So
good trade, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
and it was he's just a massive collector of old vintage toys and stuff like that. And we got talking, and it's funny because we pretty much, when you listen to that episode, that's us in real life. You know what I mean? It wasn't any kind of prelim kind of talk about what we're going to talk about. That's We were learning stuff about each other on the show. Like, so you're on that journey,
Yeah.
and learning about collectibles and different stuff. And you know, he's such a great guy because he says on the show that he's got a guy in NECA, and I'll hook you up with him. Sure enough, 2 days later, he sends me the contact of the guy in NECA, and it's like, wow, he comes through. So
From his word, he seemed like an
um,
absolute gent as well. From listening to the show, he seemed like an absolute gentleman.
and he's every bit the gent that he comes across as. So we
Not
can tag him in the
a
show
show.
as well when you're putting it up. Yeah, tag him when you're putting a show up as well, because I told him on the network and we do, where we put his name, we'll tag him. So tag him when you're putting this show, because it's so you get to meet these people that you never think you would meet, or not even meet, like in person, because obviously the days of meeting someone under the bridge, under the clock, are gone. You're meeting people face to face like we are now,
Yeah.
especially in 2020, and you're meeting them and you're building a relationship with them through conversation. So that conversation doesn't matter whether it's nose to nose or sniffing the same air. It's a matter of you're having real conversation with someone
Yeah. Sure,
about things that,
look at even us two. Like, we met once before this when
yeah,
Ara used to run the Kick Out show, and you
yeah,
came on, and we met once, and then all of a sudden, with the graphic design, I think Dara said you were looking for a logo, and we just got talking, and then just things just snowballed, and it was all through Facebook Messenger, through Zoom.
yeah. And we're buddies now. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And that's how relationships are now, nowadays. Which is, I suppose, that's one thing that you can give the internet credit for. But yeah. So that's I always segue on these shows. I do it on my own show as well. So your listeners are probably going, "Who's this fucking guy?" But that's okay.
Don't worry, I'm a nightmare for segueing as well. Sometimes I need to put myself back in my box and like.
I'm all about the segue, dude. I'm all about the segue. And you know what? Generally, the listeners are all about the segue as well. So the listeners now, I'm going to do you a solid and tell you that this has been a great show. Trying to do mind tricks there, you know what I mean? Might not work.
Well, listen, fingers crossed it does. Speaking of mind tricks, here's a nice little segue. I don't know if you've seen the Disney Plus announcements of all the TV shows that are coming.
I did.
Sure, you've seen that Fantastic Four was announced as a movie, but in them shows, speaking of mind tricks,
will it be done properly now? Will we finally get a proper Fantastic Four movie? Because I mean, so far they've been all bullshit. No offense to
rarely misses. MCU and Kevin Feige, they rarely miss. So
they rarely miss, and that's it. I'd agree with you on that one, because I'm like, we've yet to see a real Fantastic Four movie. Like, no offense to anybody. Like, Jessica Alba is just a piece of ass. Let's be fair. She's in there because she's hot. We all know she's hot, and look, she does as good a job as she can do. But it's actually the storyline that doesn't lend itself to it. You know what I mean? It's just, yeah. I mean, what's the guy that plays what's the guy that plays Reed?
all I remember is Captain America plays Johnny Storm.
Yeah, he plays Johnny Storm, which is already a no-no for me. Like, I hate when you see the same guy playing two different characters.
Yeah.
It's like, no. Yeah, I'm gonna turn this off. I turned it off. I tried to watch it again 2 nights ago, and I turned it off. I was like, nah, no, I'll wait for the new one.
It shows how much of a flop the movie was, though, because like Chris Evans was in Fantastic Four first, and then he was in Captain America. But when you came in Captain America, nobody was like, "Oh, that's Johnny Storm." But now, if you watch the old Fantastic Four movies back, you're like, "That's Captain America."
Exactly. It's actually so bad, and the narrative is terrible. It's like Doctor Doom is already this like famous scientist and all. You know, and it's like you've rewritten history now just to suit this movie. It's actually terrible. I mean, these comics were already big sellers anyway. So you don't need to change nothing. But that's a problem with Hollywood as well.
It's
You know?
all these issues span from the comic book, like basically comic books nearly going bust in the 90s when Marvel had to sell the rights to a lot of their characters, and Fox for years screwed up Fantastic Four and X-Men to the point of Marvel stopped selling Fantastic Four comics for about almost 10 years in spite, because Fox were getting all the profits from
Fox screw up everything though, don't they?
oh,
Like, because I mean, they were all for Donald Trump, at the start of this, and then as soon as Donald Trump didn't get elected, they were like, "Oh, we're not gonna promote Donald Trump anymore." It's like, you know what? You're just little bloodsuckers. Let's fuck Fox.
the only thing I'll ever give them credit for in terms of comic book movies was Logan was a great movie.
Logan was a great movie, but you wanted controversy on your show, so I'll give it to you. Fuck Fox. Unless you want to come and sponsor us, then it's a different story.
And
we're open to negotiations.
We'll play nice. we have on the shows, we have WandaVision, which will be the first one dropping, which I think is going to be their way to segue the mutants into the MCU, with Scarlet Witch's powers of reality bending.
Yeah. I think so. And what about it looks like Punisher is going to be coming back as well.
And looks like Jon Bernthal could be keeping that role.
Listen, is there any other Punisher?
No,
there isn't.
There's
been 3 different versions of Punisher before him, right?
Yeah.
Or 2. No, there's been 3 in total. 3. He is the Punisher.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's him to the Punisher is like Ryan Reynolds to Deadpool.
There you go. And it's the same with what's the guy who plays Daredevil? What's his name?
Charlie Cox.
Yeah, I think he's done a fantastic job as Daredevil as well. So.
And there's rumors he's going to be in the new Spider-Man movie.
Nice.
Along with every other character ever written.
Well, it's the same with Steve Amell as Arrow. He is Arrow.
Yeah.
Because who gave a shit about Arrow before that show was made? Nobody. People went back and looked at that because, in fairness, Arrow was basically, no offense to DC, but like a cheap kind of Robin Hood knockoff.
Yeah.
That's how he looked on paper.
It was Robin Hood kind of mixed with Batman.
Yeah.
And 100% right. I had no interest. I didn't know who Green Arrow was. I'd heard the name until the show came out, and then I went back and read the comics.
Yeah, same with me. So I did read another line of comics. There you go. So I went back and looked at it. But no, I think some of these TV shows are great. And for a while, it looked like DC were kind of starting to kill Marvel on the TV show side of things. Then Marvel come back with like that with Daredevil, and I think Daredevil was the first to kind of really blow them out of the water. And then obviously Jessica Jones came in, and
Jessica Jones, I thought it was still my favorite Marvel Netflix show. I think just what were the subplots and what was like said without being said was just, I thought it was built amazing from in terms of
it was built because I'm actually I'm in the midst of going back and watching them now at the moment.
And I'm not dropping any spoilers on you.
Yeah, so I think I'm on episode 3 at the moment, and I can see it starting to build, and it's good to see David Tennant in there as well. Now I was like, oh, now I know. I was like, I knew it was him anyway because you can tell that voice a mile away.
Fantastic.
An Irishman
always preferred him as a villain than a hero. I always thought he played a better villain.
He's a great villain, man. He's such a great underrated actor as well. Like Doctor Who and all wasn't my thing. You know what I mean? It never will be. That's not my kind of my favorite kind of stuff. But as a villain, he is absolutely fantastic. And so I think it's really great. Like literally 2021 to 2022 is going to be phenomenal.
Yeah,
with Marvel. That Disney app is just going to explode now.
Yeah, the Mandalorian's been keeping it afloat for the minute, and now with all these Marvel shows, they've already said they're upping their price by like $2 a month or something. They're gonna get it after them announcements. They're gonna get it.
Yeah, well, $2. They needn't to do it over here though.
Yeah, well, I've already paid for the year, so they can, unless they want to sponsor us, then I'll pay me £3.
I'll talk about everything they want to do. Everything.
Well,
we are horrible.
I was just touched on it there with the Spider-Man movie. I don't know. You, like me, would have seen kind of the first Spider-Man movies were the Raimi trilogy. Now, I don't know how much of the show you've listened to. I wasn't a huge fan of the Raimi trilogy. Then we had the Amazing Spider-Man 2 movies, and then we finally got an MCU Spider-Man and Tom Holland, which for me, I've always said Tom Holland was hands down the best all-around Spider-Man. Tobey Maguire was okay Peter Parker, terrible Spider-Man. Garfield, terrible Peter Parker, great Spider-Man. Whereas I think Tom Holland's mixed it nicely. But now they're bringing Garfield and Maguire back for this Spider-Man 3, which could be okay. I don't like Tobey Maguire as an actor. I'm just going to say it there now. But
you're like my missus actually. She's of the same opinion. Yeah. To be honest with you, yeah, she's of the same opinion. So
well, she's right. But with that, what I don't agree with is they're bringing back Emma Stone, who was amazing as Gwen Stacy, but they're bringing back Kirsten Dunst, who openly in an interview bashed the MCU Spider-Man films, so basically saying they were terrible. And I'm like, why bring her in? Why give her the exposure? She's not a great actress anyway. She has the emotional range of a broom.
Yeah, she's of the what's that chick from Twilight?
Kristen Stewart.
Yeah, similar name and everything, right? Similar name and everything. Yeah, they don't lend themselves too well to. No, I don't. No, sorry, I was just clearing up some coffee spillage that I had there that I didn't realize was there from this morning. So, there was. It's kind of cool that they're bringing them back, but I don't understand why. I suppose it's a homage. I mean, I didn't think the way you actually kind of so beautifully and eloquently described it for me there that Tobey Maguire was a great Peter Parker, a terrible Spider-Man. That's actually perfect. Because I didn't think about it that way. Because I did like Tobey Maguire, and she hated him. She just hates Tobey Maguire anyway as an actor. Sorry, Toby, my missus hates you. But I think you're actually 100% correct there. I think it's obviously a case that there's something likable about him, but as Peter Parker, when he's Spider-Man, it's just too CGI'd.
Yeah, you know
what I mean?
There was no humor. There was no quips. It didn't work in the suit. Whereas Garfield was the opposite. Outside the suit, he looked too cool to be Peter Parker, but inside the suit, he had the quips and the bits of humor. Whereas Holland has both.
Oh, Tom Holland is literally, he's Peter Parker and Spider-Man without a shadow of a doubt.
You mentioned earlier, Stan Lee himself, before he passed, rest in peace, said Tom Holland was born to play Spider-Man.
We see, that's what I'm saying. You're getting a situation now where you've got, I think Disney being involved in Marvel, as much as a lot of people hated it initially, because Disney are just buying over everything.
Yeah.
Like, it's actually a good thing because they do have the right. I mean, because Marvel is its own entity there now. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's what's good about Disney. And there's a lot of people scared that Disney are going to buy over WWE as well, which, I think within 5 to 10 years' time, I think you will see that happen as well, personally.
Yeah.
But I don't think that will be a bad thing either. It's just they are building a network of things, and I always said, like, when this Disney network came out, like, you're gonna have to give it time because these guys are gonna procure absolutely everything and anything. It wouldn't surprise me if they fucking take over DC at some point as well. You know what I mean, and own both and just have them work off. But what Disney are good at is that they do allow people to work within their own realms. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh, Disney has to be plastered all over Marvel. No, they own it, but they have it as Marvel.
Yeah. Same with Star Wars. What they look at, The Mandalorian has revitalized the Star Wars franchise.
Yeah. I've never been a big Star Wars man. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to get to The Mandalorian for sure.
I will say my partner was never a huge Star Wars fan, but she loves The Mandalorian.
Yeah, I probably will get into it for sure. It's just I got to get through all these books first.
Yeah.
Because I'm an extremist. Like, once you
start,
I want to go back. And I buy everything. Then I'm like, right, I'm gonna get that. I'm gonna get that, and I get that, and I just keep having deliveries at my door every day, and it's like a stack of books. This time, I'm like, whoa, how am I gonna do this? So
Like you mentioned there, weren't sure why they were bringing them back. They've actually said it looks like it's going to be a multiverse for the Spider-Man movie. Looks like one division is going to set it up, moving into the Doctor Strange movie, and then the Spider-Man universe because they're bringing back Melina, who played Doc Ock in Spider-Man 2, who, in my opinion, was the best thing
Oh,
about that trilogy.
yes, he was amazing. He was amazing.
And they're bringing back Shocker from Amazing Spider-Man, and they're bringing back all these villains, and I think they're heading the Sinister Six route.
Oh, okay, which I don't mind. To be honest with you, because once you've got Doctor Strange there and you can do the multiverse thing, it's pretty cool. It's so confusing for so many people, and you know what? For a lot of people getting into comics early, because I always have people like Rachel asking me, "So what way does this work?" So like, if
Yeah.
Peter Parker was back in 1967, but now he's here, like, how is he here now again? So it's like this will probably do a great job in explaining what the multiverse is too. Do you know what I mean? And like I say, because it's Marvel people actually running it, I think it's a good thing.
And apparently now the good news I heard was it looks like Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield are only going to be in it for the third act, so the final act. So I think it might be a case of where Tom Holland's struggling with the Sinister Six, and then these two are going to come through portals just to give him a hand in the last battle.
Which will be super cool, man.
It will, just as long as the Tobey Maguire doesn't stick around, because I hate his face and his stupid facial expressions and his stupid dance in Spider-Man 3 and his emo fringe.
Oh god. Oh god. Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm not judging you. I'm with you.
But yeah, I won't get too much into that. If I get into a Tobey Maguire rant, I'll be here till Christmas Day.
That's fair. I'm with you.
Yeah. Look, yourself in with the network, you've promoted yourself there as a new and old comic reader. You know, you enjoyed the older stuff, you enjoyed the art, and you're getting back into the comics in physical form now. And you're a master collector, former pro wrestler, and current Vince McMahon of the Dynamo Podcast Network. And while also running Dynamo's Dozen, while also doing Upper Tier, the Four Pod Men. Are you mates with Doctor Strange, man? Where do you get the time to do all this?
Um that's a good question. Yeah, you're probably right. Maybe I am. Maybe I am. I don't know. I think I find it, you see, the thing about it is I always have like, I never take on anything that I don't think I can do. And I'll always recommend that to people because you'll have all these different ideas. I think what it is that you have, I believe that you've one main thing, right? And then you'll have segues out of everything. You know what I mean? You'll have little derivatives and stuff like that from the one main thing that you do. So obviously the main thing is the network.
Yeah.
And my main thing is Dynamo's Dozen, and then the Four Podmen, whatever, and then we obviously have. So again, it stems from one thing.
Yeah.
So it's just once you have that, and like, to be fair, Peter, got to give you some kudos here as well. You've done a great job in being one of the right hand men in this as well. So you're giving all the credit to me there unfairly. Um, like, I've been very lucky enough to have people like yourself, Niall Hogan, Dara Marr, Carl King Wall, Jason Kennedy, Ted. Who else am I forgetting? There's loads of people we're forgetting here. Um, there's always going to be someone texting me. You should have said me, and I'm like, all right.
Hmm.
But we have quite a good little team here, and it's not a huge team, but it's a team, and I think that's the real important factor. The question, to answer your question, dude, without just putting you over, that I couldn't do it without all you guys, really, because the fact that we have other people taking care of their own business allows me to kind of keep an eye on other things and also take care of my things and maintain a healthy relationship with a female, you know.
Wait till the kid comes into the picture. We'll talk then.
Oh, listen, well, again, she'll be taking care of her or him, whatever it may be. Um, but I think that's really what it boils down to, is who you have around you. Do you know what I mean? And allows you the time to do that. COVID has helped a little bit. I'm not going to lie. So, um, not that that's a good thing, but like, I suppose.
Make the best out of that situation. You know, at the
Well,
end.
that's exactly it. that's exactly it, and I think it gives us a head start now as to where we would have been. We could have been a year from now.
Yeah.
Pretty much getting to the point that we are now. Um, and I think, yeah, honestly, I think the team that we have around us is pretty fucking awesome. Everyone's on the same page. Everybody is, doing their own little bit that they need to do to keep the wheels turning.
Yeah.
And to be fair, dude, I'm just a cog in the wheel. You know what I mean?
Oh, I see. I disagree there. I'd put us down as what I promote the network as on Twitter is we're the Avengers of podcasting, and then you are the Captain America. You're the one that holds it all together. And I class myself as Spider-Man because I'm the young buck. I throw the odd bit of humor in there in the group chats, and I compare myself to Spider-Man because it's my show and I'll do what I want. Um,
And the main man that I didn't mention there that you forgot to mention too, of course, was Noel Hogan, who is who was my right hand man, really. Like, and Noel obviously runs the wrestling shop, and he has his own family and his own things to do and stuff like that. But he's just as big a part as the success of this as anybody as well, because he's kind of like my right hand man. And I understand what you're saying. I think, yeah, because he'd be like my Tony Stark to
yeah,
my Captain America, if that's what you're saying. Like, it keeps me on my toes and blah blah blah. But like, what it
it'd
is,
be
I
Black Widow
suppose
just to piss him off.
you could say that. You
Yeah.
could say that. But I suppose what it is it's just a case of kind of keeping everybody's morale up in the sense that they want to continue doing something. You know what I mean? Um, we're early on into this. You know what I mean? Like, let's not kid anybody. We're not making loads of money or anything right now, but at the same time, you got to spend money and create stuff to make money, and that's essentially what we're doing. And we're not really in it for money yet. We're in it for getting it off the ground, and
Just the
when you
love
do
of
things.
podcast and the love of what our specific subjects are.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. And I think, for anybody listening to your particular show right now, if they feel like that they want to do a podcast, cool, do it. Like, it's actually, it's not the most impossible thing to do, but it's also not the easiest thing to do either. Don't want to kid people,
It's
because
time and effort.
it really does. It does. And it's creating content, it's procuring. One of my busiest times that I have is networking.
Yeah.
That's where I get super busy. It's networking. You know what I mean? People always think, "Oh, you're only doing two of the podcast, or blah blah blah, or three of the podcast, or whatever. And other people are doing this," and I'm like, "Well, okay. You're trying to keep a network of people going. You're trying to fucking learn the dynamics of how it goes from this level to that level on a continual basis in a genre and an industry that is changing by the hour. So you got to be on your toes, you know what I mean? Because there's other people. And look, credit to the other people. There's other people that are doing the same. But I've always remembered people going, "Oh, how do you feel about with Dynamo's doesn't? How do you feel about such and such coming out with a podcast that's similar to yours?" I'm like, it's not similar to mine. I'm a pop culture show.
Yeah.
Just because I've had a million pro wrestlers on the show, I'm a pop culture show. And I made sure to do that early on because of smart people around me going, "Look, it's very niche. You don't want to be too niche." But people know my background, so they associate me with pro wrestling. So I'll always have that. But I'll also have a little bit extra for other people that want to. And guess what?
We started
Some
out just a comic show, and now I've branched more into all realms of pop culture, whether it be toys and collectibles, whether it be writers of not just comics or books. I'm not pushing into your kind of area yet. I wouldn't like music wouldn't be my area of expertise to go into, or pro wrestling, but I'm pushing into more pop culture in terms of TV and movies. And like you said, it's just like them smart people around you said, it's trying not to box yourself into a small niche.
exactly. And when you do that, and you can only do that, that's when the problem starts. You know what I mean? Because you're left at a certain level and
Yeah.
you plateau, whereas you always want to progress. So,
Well, look, I'm
so I
always
don't know. That's very kind of you to say, but I'm not a I'm not the Captain America of anything yet until I take over everything.
Or we could call you the Nick Fury.
Could do that.
Look, I've nerded out. I'm for leading over an hour now, and I won't keep you for too much longer. So I don't want you ending up divorced by the end of the show before Christmas, taking time away from the partner. But
That
yeah,
won't happen. People seen me, and people can see me. They're like, how am I going to end up divorced? Yeah, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of your listeners that will be queuing up, waiting in case I do. But all I'll say, guys, it's cold outside. Please don't wait. Now you're getting a bit of the wrestling character. Now that's the Dynamo. That's the Dynamo. That's not Ian Kelly, okay? Don't be writing into Peter going, he's a cunt. He's a very arrogant prick. But you know I'm right. All I'm saying is,
look, anything to
wrestling style now, all right? Wrestling style now. Wrestling could do with a character like that, right?
if you want anything else to leave off, you mentioned there all the important points of podcasting. So does the Jordan Belfort of podcasting have anything else to say to those out there?
No, I think when I listen to your podcast, I mean, I think it's one of the best comic shows that I listen to. You know, we're not going to put over any other comic book shows. We're not going to put over any other wrestling shows unless they're on the network. So you're not getting that from us. But no, I think what you're doing at the moment, like I say, dude, what you've done over the last kind of 3 weeks in kind of taking the next step to the next level with getting the guests that you've had on has been superior, and no pun intended. And I think long may it continue. I think listen to everything. I mean, we've got Dara running the NFL show for anybody that's into American football. Check that out. The ASI podcast, the NFL show is there. That's going to be growing again in the new year. We're going to have a lot more shows on the Dynamo Podcast Network. By the way, Dynamo Podcast Network, follow us on YouTube. There's already some videos up there, which include yours truly, Mr. Peter Hart. And yeah, like, I mean, just keep supporting him, because I think this is going to blow up at some point, because there's so many more shows coming as well.
Yeah.
In the new year, like, if people knew the shit that we're talking about, which you know, in terms of different types of podcasts, we can give you kind of hints. You know, we've got guys that are interested in doing retro movie podcasts. I'm going to be part of a boxing podcast for anyone that's into boxing, and possibly MMA mixed in with it. But we'll have other people, and just a little taste of what's to come. And what I would say as well, you know, if it is a thing that you feel like you have a decent podcast that you would like to do something different outside of what's happening at the moment, throw it our way, and you know, we'll definitely have a look at it and take ideas. And if you need that little head start, that's what we're about. Do you know what I mean? If you need a little head start in how to go about creating your own podcast, then you're better off sending it to us, because you'll have like the best support system, I think, anywhere. I'm sure Peter would agree.
Yeah, 100%. Look, so I'm getting called by the little one, as many of my fans will know. It happens a lot. But thanks for a million for coming on the show, Ian, and listen to everyone. Dynamo Podcast Network on YouTube and Spotify, as well as Dynamo's Dozen. Make sure to check them out. From me, Peter, and from Ian, the Dynamo Kelly, we've been Superior Comic Show, and have a Merry Christmas.